So as you can see from the speakers, that was a very passionate and committed and dedicated discussion on big data. And our panel members here are very fresh and sharp for all your questions. So please use Slido to put forward any questions that you may have. But before I look at the questions, I might revert to Ian and Wesley just to ask them their reflections on the two presentations we've just heard, particularly on the big data and genomics. So if I may start with you, Ian, maybe to give us just a 2-minute summary of your thoughts and feedback from the discussion, please.
Okay, thanks. I suppose that the thing for me that's important to take away from this is actually a lot of what we've listened to we already know. A lot of what we've listened to we've seen others do, and we're in a position where we're following at the moment. I think that it's one thing, to quote James Campbell, it's one thing to transmit and relay this information to others, but people have to have receivers switched on to take it on board. This must be about being able to change your behaviour and drive behavioural change in the industry, because at the moment where we are, we're losing so much time. I think we have some of the best scientists in the world on our doorstep, and I think if we take that expertise and that knowledge, and the first thing with the genetics discussion is you've got to measure. So you've got to know what your starting point is to measure and establish what your rate of gain is. And if you look at efficiency of primary production, we've got plenty of scientists and technologists to drive that and improve that. We then go to processing. We look at packaging technology, processing technology, and then we look at the consumer, and we look at the focus on, especially in our genetics and our red meat industry, we look at eating quality and the quality of what we produce. And if we take all of those things, I've no doubt that we have in the room and in Northern Ireland the best people in the world to deliver on that, because ultimately if we don't do that, we're going to get left behind on this one.
Thank you. And your thoughts, Wesley?
Okay, thank you. I just really want to reiterate what my president said in his opening remarks at the start of this conference. Change is happening, but the pace of change is getting even more frightening going forward. And I think certainly the whole issue around big data particularly is clearly showing that things have moved and will continue to move at an enormous pace. We are encouraged that when we talk to the younger farming generation out there, that they are up for embracing this change and they do want to move on and move on quickly. We can get into specifics, I suppose, about big data genomics, but I'll leave that to the questions coming forward. But key message is that we're there and ready to embrace change, and it's important that we have the ability to do so.
Great, thank you. Well, maybe while I'm just waiting for the questions to come up. Oh, great, thank you very much. We might kick off with the questions in view that we're short of time, and I know a lot of you would have put forward questions on the previous session. Please rest assured that those questions will be taken on board and will be addressed and will form the basis of future discussions. So don't be disappointed if you don't see your question here, and that goes the same for this session. So without further ado, we'll just kick off with really where your thoughts are. So the first question is, how can we get farmers to keep accurate records to generate the data we need? Can we always believe the data generated? So maybe I might divert that maybe to Donna, and then maybe I might ask from on the ground, maybe from Ian or Wesley, comments, please.
So I'll answer the second bit first, and it's quite simply no. We can't always believe the data were generated, but hopefully you would have seen that that's what contributes to the lower heritability. So 10% of the pedigree is wrong, but we're still after increasing milk production by 50% over the last 25 years. Right? So there is a lot of inaccuracies in the system, but that's already encapsulated within this heritability. So we account for the fact that the data is inaccurate. How can we get farmers to record more data? It's a great question. If I knew the answer, it'd be brilliant. But I guess to use an analogy, if we have a pain in our big toe, right? And you want to diagnose yourself, all this medical doctor online now, you're not going to tell lies to the actual system because you want to diagnose a problem. So to me, if we want to get people to insert accurate data, we need to be sure that you actually get the reports, accurate reports back. And it was the slide I skipped was this new index which we have launched, what we call the cow index, which encapsulates all of the data within the farmer, and it's live. So what we're getting is the really good farmers, they run this cow index, it ranks their cow based on expected profitability thereafter, and then they go in and they put some events and they re-rank it. So for example, it predicts based on genetic merit, age, whether it's a crossbred or not, its current calving month, it predicts the next calving month, right? But if you do, so if it calves in say March, or if it calves in May, it's not going to calve in January, okay? Can't do that. But it has a 10% chance of calving in February, 20% chance of calving in March. Now, if the farmer puts in a pregnancy diagnosis that says that the calf is such and such a gestation, now you tell the farmer it's definitely going to calve on the 14th of February, and this is the profit expected from that animal there afterwards. If you put in a mastitis event, this animal has actually cost you so much money by putting in this data. To me, that's the only way we can get farmers to record, is to get the data back. Not the data, sorry. Jesus, don't give them back the data. Give them back
This is
the
a live
decision.
performance, so we can't bleep any language. So.
Give them back the decision support, not the data.
Okay, thank you, Donna. And maybe over to you, Ian, really to understand at a farming level, what can we really do to encourage farmers? We know I suppose, the accuracy of data is, good quality data in, good quality data out. Rubbish in is rubbish out. So can you give us your thoughts at a farming level, what we can do regarding data generation?
Yeah, I think this isn't that complicated. The reality is, from a farming perspective, if you're going to encourage the collection of good, accurate data and accurate records, you've got to demonstrate what the benefits are. You've got to relate to the farmer what the tangible benefits of this inconvenience, for want of a better word, is. The reality is, when we look at our red meat sector and we compare and contrast to the intensive sector, and everyone knows that the poultry sector and the pig sector all record. They all record very accurate information, and they can tell you very accurate figures and statistics about their business. Now, whether we like it or whether we don't, it's probably a consequence of the socio-economic policy with Europe and support payments and support mechanisms, because the unsupported sectors that had to record or go out of business have changed. And when you look at genetic gain over the last 30 years in those sectors compared to genetic gain that we've got, for example, in our red meat sector, there's a huge variation. So I firmly believe that if you're going to ask the industry to record, you've got to demonstrate the benefits of that recording. And you know what? I hate to say it, but I love to see good ecology, good environment, green fields, fast-flowing clean water. But the big motivator for everyone in this room is money. So if you demonstrate that it's financially advantageous to know the information and you can be more efficient and better, then you'll drive accurate information.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sorry, if I could just add one further point to what's already been said. Incentivisation benefits are critical going forward, and it's interesting that in the south of Ireland, things really kicked off when the benefits started being relayed back to farmers, but then the government provided a scheme and money, and that's when things really started. And we do see an opportunity going forward with a revised agriculture policy for the UK, for Northern Ireland, that we can maybe use the existing funding that we get to try and look at activity and generating sort of sustainable production, as we're keen to do. So we're very keen to look at the potential in the sort of medium to longer term to start doing that going forward and really sort of lift our game up at that particular point in time. So.
Okay, thank you very much, Wesley. I suppose on a similar theme of financial remuneration, we'll go on to the next question, which is, how do we stop commercial AI companies from narrowing the genetic choice available to farmers because they are chasing profit? So, Donna?
Shortly, with great difficulty. But like they're commercial entities, they're profit-based, and let's be under no illusion that things are nice and rosy in the Republic of Ireland. Like, we have this entity called Gene Ireland, where we've got several, not all, of the indigenous breeding companies bought into this policy, and every single year there's a fight. They want to leave because they have this genomic tech bulls where they're selling at a discounted rate. They could flog them for a lot more widespread. But all that happens is that you can have one spontaneous mutation. So everybody here is carrying around 400 mutations that you didn't inherit from your parents, right? And that could be bad, and that could absolutely destroy the industry if one of those goes. So you need buy-in, and dare I say it, like a lot of other commercial companies are regulated to some extent, and there may need to be some regulation to go in there, because the lifetime, as I said, of a CEO is very short. They're just interested in the return on investment. And as one famous person in charge of a breeding company said in Ireland, why do we need to test all these bulls? Why don't we just test the best one? But you need to test all the bulls to find the best one.
Very interesting comment. The next question is, could BVD tissue samples be used to select superior genetics, and who would own the data? How about you,
Well,
Stephen?
I'll start,
Would
but
you
I'll
like
hand
to
over to
lead that?
Donna quite quickly. Yeah, it's something we've been looking at AFP. We had a project working with DERA looking at the possibility of tissue sampling of the ear tag and getting more from that sample. The technology is moving that direction. You can get more and more extractions of DNA such from the sample, but I know Donna has been sort of looking into this in the south of Ireland, probably best placed to comment of where it's at now.
Yes, you can. In short, you can do a genomic test from the BVD sample. From the question on dataship of ownership, it's a very hairy issue. So ownership relates to property, and there's really three types of property. There's the real property, there's personal property, and there's intellectual property. The problem with agriculture is it transverses the whole three of them. So if you generate some data, you need to own the land that generated the data, you need to own and possibly even develop the equipment that generated the data, and you need the intellectual property to have interrogated the data. So you might get an ELISA back from a BVD, that's just data, but who interrogated it for you? So ownership in relation to data from an agricultural perspective is not very clear, and we must also be aware that there doesn't need to be just one owner. There could be multiple owners.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next question. I hope this pace is okay. I'm keen to go through the questions, really your thoughts, you know, to get the opportunity to have the expertise on the panel to discuss this. So the next question is, when will Northern Ireland have its own national database as per ICBF? We are 20 years behind, exclamation mark by one of our attendees. Who would like to perhaps talk about that?
I'll start off. So within the Food Strategy Board, the Agri-Food Strategy Board, there was a group, the Livestock Genetics Subgroup. Within that group, AFP was involved in developing up sort of proposals and looking at the progress we're getting genetically. Since, obviously, the Agri-Food Strategy Board have ceased, that's been taken over by a new evolution of the group as such, and probably Wesley's probably best placed in the panel maybe to give us an update of just where things are.
Thanks. I suppose the background is, as Stephen said, Agri-Food Strategy Board were commissioned to do a report to look at this. So actually commissioned an international company, Abacus Bio, to look at this, look at the Northern Ireland situation and see what was the best strategy. The outworking of that was a very comprehensive report that indicated what the blueprint was, what, in their opinion, which was a very objective opinion, what the best plan for Northern Ireland was. So it's there, it exists. It was £100,000 of industry money was committed to this project. So we have a template, we have a blueprint. We can flog this discussion to death, but it's there. We need at some point to get on and do it and deliver some of this stuff. So as I said, we've got the best people, we have a plan, we now need the actors to make it happen. And I think that's probably where Wesley's involvement and the others now, you know, tasked with this job come in.
It's a bit like a relay. The baton's just been handed over. Agri-Food Strategy Board did a lot of good work, and that's all there. And it's just to let you know here today that it hasn't all been lost by no means. In fact, it's very much to the top of the agenda in terms of trying to take it forward. In light of the Agri-Food Strategy Board winding down, there's a new industry group has informally been set up. It comprises Northern Ireland Meat Exporters, DERA UK, LMC and UFU, and we work in conjunction with DERA and CAFRI, and we have had a series of discussions since last autumn, and we are keen to try and move things on. It's not about reinventing the wheel by no means, it's taking what's already been there and actually moving it forward. So we've had discussions in terms of how we progress it. I think in broad terms, the whole issue about data collection, about some sort of incentivisation scheme going forward, all of those things are in the mix. We certainly do want to establish some sort of a wider industry grouping going forward, just in the same way as we did historically with BVD when we established Animal Health and Welfare NI. This is not about those four groups I mentioned earlier actually taking this forward. We want the industry to own this and take it forward. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be an ongoing process, but we really want to get something in place, certainly by the end of this year at the latest, to try and take it on. So key message today from me is that what we have there in terms of trying to actually progress in terms of genomic technology, hopefully that will happen for our ruminant livestock sector sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you, panel members, for that. It was perhaps useful and valuable to have that question and to have an update, so thank you for that. Our last question, I think, for this session will be the following. How will Bovis be used for research, and how does this data sharing affect this going forward, and who owns the data? Similar theme to previous. I might hand that over to Stephen, please.
Okay, yep, thank you. Well, obviously, as touched on in the slides, Bovis can be very much used to develop up and provide research on trend analysis, forecasting, the interactions between all those intrinsities within a production system. So very, very important to be able to deliver that type of research. We're able to then provide that information out to policy and producer tools. sort of following it on further, but obviously we can do the research on the genetic side. If you've got SAR and parentage information, you can start to do a lot more in the research of the genetic side. And again, that's what Donna's really touched on, and maybe he'll follow up on. The question just on data sharing and going forward, obviously there's the new rules coming in terms of data sharing, a kick-off in May as such. But again, it's not so much about who owns data, it's more around who has access, who has permissions, who has the right to view and look at the data. And again, with all the bogus applications, there's data sharing agreements put in place from the start, and they constantly change over time. So it's not a particular issue, you just got to have it addressed from the start. And maybe Donna wants to follow up there just on the research from industry data.
So all data inside the ICBF is put in on condition that it's fully available for use in research.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, 1 minute I've been told, so excellent, thank you very much. So we'll go on to another question, apologies. How can the concepts of genetics and DNA technologies be implemented at farm level? And I suppose, again, we're thinking a lot of what we spoke about today is quite high-powered, you know, genomics, big data, and for farmers on the ground, this mightn't be to the forefront of their mind. So who would like to take this?
I think we've probably already answered this question. It's actually delivering the benefits on the ground, and certainly if we can look at some sort of incentivisation as they had in the Republic of Ireland, that would be the real step change going forward. So in theory it should be happening anyhow, but we have to give it a helping hand.
Okay. Ian, would you like to
This
make a comment?
ultimately is about data turning into information. It's about communication between the people that know how to interpret the data and understand it and translate that to farmers. This discussion about genetic gain and genetic progress hasn't changed in the last 5 years. We will get there eventually if we trundle along at the speed we're going. But if we want to fast track this, we have to look at it slightly differently. So, you know, I think that we need to just all get together collectively and drive this one forward.
I fully agree with that point. The vast majority of farmers in Ireland, dairy farmers, don't even probably know they're using this DNA technology, but 70% of the bulls sold last year were selected based on DNA technology. So if we look at it from an Irish perspective, how we got it implemented on farm was was already mentioned in the beef, there had to be financial incentives, and secondly, the dairy guys who they're more rapid adopters of innovation, they paid for the whole thing themselves because they saw a very clear return on investment. But the principles, and that was my point, do not change.
Okay, thank you. Well, what I'd like to do is to draw this discussion to a close, and I want you to warmly thank all the panel for their expertise in answering all the questions. So thank you very much. Thank you.